I start with a nice pair of sharp fabric scissors, and I usually cut to my right side. So I'm right-handed, so if you're left-handed, you're gonna do that opposite. And I have my left hand holding the fabric down. This fabric is a little gooey, so it needs a little extra care. When I get to the end of the pattern, I cut a little bit beyond the pattern, and then I can continue cutting. So I cut a little bit beyond, and then I can turn around and cut. All the way up the pattern, like this. Now, I really want to cut right at the edge of the pattern where my size is. On this pattern, I am the 5th size in, and it's a solid line, so I'm cutting right at that line. I don't want to cut the pattern piece, but I don't want to leave any excess at the side either. It takes some practice, but you can do it. Then once we have our pattern piece cut out, there's many indicating features on the pattern that we need to mark. I'll need to mark the darts, the notches, and any gathering information that I need. So I'll first do the notches because I can do that with my scissors. And I'm going to take a clip in the fabric, but it needs to be a very small clip. We're only doing about 1/4 of an inch clip. So I'm clipping this. This is considered a notch. It's a little line in the fabric there. This is a notch, and then I have another notch at the top of my pattern here. So I'm clipping those notches, just 1/4 of an inch, and then I will mark my other, these X's need to be marked, and what I can do is I can either do that with a clip in the fabric, but I need to do it near the edge, so or I can mark it with a friction pen or some chalk. I have a friction pen right here, and it is removable with ironing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the area. This is the solid X, so I will mark an X by folding up my pattern piece right there, marking an X. And a friction pen is a gel pen that comes off when you iron it. Don't do this with a regular ink pen. You can use a water-soluble pen, or you can use chalk, and not regular chalk, like a chalkboard chalk, but dressmaker's chalk. So I see that I have another line right here, and I'm marking that X right there. And then I'm going to have to do it on the back side as well, make sure it's in the same spot on the back side. And I can do that. If it's hard to see, I can place a pin through both layers, and then I'll know exactly where to mark it. My dart, I do a little bit differently. I mark that with tracing paper. Here's my tracing paper, and it is folded in half currently. It has a waxy surface on it that will transfer to the garment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip it through both layers because I want to mark on the back side of the fabric. I don't want to mark on the front side of the fabric for my dart. I mark on the back side while I'm keeping it closed, keeping my pattern closed. So it marks the dart on both sides because it needs to be symmetrical on both sides. So I have my tracing paper in there, and I go to my size, which is the solid line, and I'm pressing very hard through the tissue paper pattern on those lines. And when you open it up, there is a very faint yellow line marking where I will sew my darts later. Continue cutting the rest of your pattern pieces out, marking any darts that you have, any notches that you have. And I like to keep my pattern pieces pinned to the fabric until I'm ready to use them. If they get unpinned from the fabric, oftentimes they can be mistaken for scraps. So keep your pattern pieces pinned to the fabric until you're ready to sew them. They also tell you what they are. So you'll see this says bodice back. It tells me what pattern I'm using and what the seam allowance is. So not every pattern tells you what the seam allowance is, but it will tell you what piece you're doing, and that will keep you organized. When I'm cutting out my pattern pieces, I might find it easier on some pieces to cut them out first or cut them out partially, especially with these curvy ones, where I cut it out more roughly and then finish cutting it out completely later. I also don't love reaching over my projects to cut them out, so I sometimes have to move around the table a bit. And I can also turn my pattern so it's easier to cut. Once it's a little smaller, then it's easier to turn it. And I can cut it just like this. And I'll continue cutting out the rest of my pieces.